think everybody should be in now, so we'll get going. Thanks everybody for attending. I know that everybody's kind of been coming from all around the world to attend this. We really appreciate your time. Today is our first webinar of what we hope to be many and long-lasting series. Yeah, hopefully you get a lot out of this today. Just before we start, I just would like to mention that it is Veterans Day and Remembrance Day in the UK and the US. So just a moment of thought towards that. And, today we honour and thank all those who have served. Introduction to myself then and to Trilogy. I'm Jordan Butler. I'm a manager here on the West Coast at Trilogy International. And I will be your host for today. So Trilogy International, just a quick introduction there. It's a tech and transformation recruitment agency. We have base in the UK, the US and Ireland. And as a business, we're definitely very passionate about diversity and inclusion. And it's been a big part of all the work that we've done with our clients and will always be a big part of all the work that we do. Which brings us nicely onto today's event, as you can see in the background there. Oh, that side. Today we'll be on attracting, retain and promoting and building a diverse workforce. We're really fortunate to be joined by some of our clients and some business leaders and ed&i experts today. And I will just quickly introduce them and they'll have a little snippet and introduce themselves as well. We'll move on first to Melissa Benua, who is a Senior Director of Engineering at Particle. Would you like to just quickly introduce yourself, Melissa?
Hi, yeah. So I'm Melissa. I have been here at Particle for about 4.5 years, but I've been in software engineering for well over 15. We'll leave it there. I started as a back-end engineer. Interesting fact about me is up until I spent the vast majority of my career up until relatively recently as the only woman ever on any engineering team up until three or four levels up. So I am, since moving into engineering leadership, really passionate about building diverse teams who don't just look like one or two models stamped out repeatedly, but have a lot of different backgrounds and opinions, and can be healthy, productive, very technical teams. Awesome.
Thanks very much. Moving swiftly onto Fred Swanico, who is a founder and CEO of African Leadership Group. Fred, do you just want to quickly introduce yourself there as well?
Sure, Jordan. Good to be here. My name is Fred Swanico, and the work that I do is to identify, develop, and connect exceptional talent in Africa, especially to great opportunities. So we, in the group, have several institutions across Africa that are educating the next generation of African leaders. And then we define leadership broadly, not just in politics, but in science and technology and business, etc. So our mission is to develop 3 million leaders for Africa in the next 15 years, and we're making a big bet on developing digital talent in Africa. So excited to be here to explore how we can contribute to global diversity by building up the pool of digital talent from Africa.
Amazing. Yeah, definitely doing some amazing work there. So keen to hear a little bit more about that. And Maura Cole, who's a talent acquisition lead at Canoe Intelligence. Would you like to quickly just introduce yourself?
Sure. Nice to be here. My name is Maura. As Jordan mentioned, I work here at Canoe Intelligence. We are a software platform specifically in the financial technology space, aggregating and automating alternative investment data. My role here at Canoe, I oversee all things talent related, everything from sourcing, interviewing, onboarding, performance management, and learning and development, and really critically thinking about how we bake DE&I into all three of those things.
Amazing, thanks. And last but not least, Chinedu Enekwe, who's the general partner of Passport Ventures. Chinedu, just a quick introduction there for me, please.
Hi, so I'm Chinedu Enekwe. I'm a partner at Passport Ventures. We invest in the global talent pool of immigrants in the United States. And one of the first things that happens when you invest is the companies that you invest in start hiring. So one of the key things that I key in on is, where are you hiring from, where are your talent pools, where are you getting that talent from, and trying to start at the earliest stages building a diverse team, because it compounds on itself either way. Awesome.
Great set of panelists. I'm sure we'll get a lot of knowledge from these guys today. So our webinar today will be structured into 3 parts. We will be we'll be looking at attracting diverse candidates, talent retention, and equitable routes to promotion as well. We'll then have about 10 minutes kind of Q&A at the end. So please send through all of your questions. Our goal today is to leave you with tangible tools and techniques that you can implement. Our panelists will be sharing case studies that you can gain some information from, and hopefully provide solutions to common challenges around ed&i. Just a little bit of housekeeping. Please put all your questions in the Q&A box, because there's a chat section, and there's also the Q&A. So please put them in there, and we'll try and get through to as many questions as we can there. So our first section is going to be, and topic will be on the attraction side of things. And when coming up for a theme for this webinar, we specifically chose to explore diversity as a whole, rather than focus on one audience in particular. That's because recruitment, ed&i strategies, and even employer brand need to speak to diverse audiences, encompassing different challenges. So our first question is going to be on ed&i strategies. So ed&i strategies need to work for a variety of unrepresented groups, whether that's women, people who identify as LGBTQ+, those with disabilities, neurodiverse candidates, ethnic minorities, and more. Maura, I'm going to throw this question to you. Could you share a couple of examples of techniques you have used to make recruitment inclusive and accessible?
Yeah, and there's so much here, there's so many aspects of this that I think are important to touch on. I think a lot of times when companies talk about attracting talent, we tend to think of, how do we get out there and reach these people, right? And what tends to be not talked about as much is the need to really make sure you're internally aligned. And when I say that, from the second that you hear that you are going to open a job, right, it's really important to sit down with hiring managers and really understand, what is it that will make this person successful in this role, right? I think a lot of times when we open a job rec, people tend to think of the ideal candidate and kind of run with that, right? But for a slew of reasons, that sort of narrows our pool and what we consider to be really good talent, right? So strategically thinking back in terms of what do we want this person to accomplish in the first 3 months, 6 months, 12 months here? And in order to do that, what are the skills, competencies, and qualifications that will ultimately lend themselves to this role, right? And so it really kind of helps to have everybody focus in on what are the minimum qualifications that this person needs to meet, and then ultimately seeing that through to a job description, right? So oftentimes with job descriptions, you'll see a lot of points about the type of person that this person needs to be, right? And at the end of the day, this person's coming in to do a job. So really focusing on shifting job descriptions from this is the person you need to be to this is the work that you'll be doing. Do you think you can do it, right? And there's so many ways to shift that language in job descriptions, really avoiding unnecessary jargon or language that's esoteric that could alienate applicants. Being very clear, not very wordy, just, this is what we're going to be asking you to do in this role. And if you think you can do it, go ahead and apply. And ultimately what that does is it creates a process in your interviewing process that helps people stay focused, right? So when you really boil down the attributes and skills and qualifications that make somebody strong in this role, you train your interviewers to be focused on those attributes as opposed to focused on that person as a whole. And a little bit about what this speaks to is that it's very important to build in structure that is intentionally inclusive so that you are not unintentionally exclusive, right? So when you're very clear on what you're looking for as you bring people through process, we have our interviewers, essentially they're given a set amount of attributes that they need to grade the people on. Once we've agreed that those are the skills that they need to meet. And then ultimately, at the end of their interview, we're not asking them if they want to hire this person. We're asking to the degree to which they did well on these individual attributes, that we're able to kind of get really, really pure feedback from each interview, and then ultimately decide at the end of the process. So I would say it's just about kind of getting your name out there, but also really ensuring that you're prepared to properly receive diverse talent and accurately assess, your candidate quality and pool.
Yeah, definitely. And has anyone got anything else to add on that in particular?
Yeah, I want to say we've also focused on the interview process itself, which is to say that a lot of engineering interviews have ritual and, well, I did it this way, and almost sometimes even a hazing aspect. Well, I had to stand in front of the whiteboard and write code for 7 hours, so you should have to too. So we've backed out and reimagined the interview process itself as to figure out what we're trying to evaluate for, which is, can this person do this job? And then to make the interview process as close as possible to the job. So rather than, for example, it's very common now for companies to say, yeah, we're going to send you a HackerRank. It's a timed test and it's full of these crazy algorithms. And then everybody says, but when was the last time I had to code, merge sort from scratch? Who has to do that? But you have to do that in interview tests. So instead we focused on, it's hard to hire a software engineer or a developer without having them write some code. So we focused on making it as natural as possible and trying to find the balance between getting as much information, as good a signal as we can that, yes, this person can do the job, while also being respectful of their time and not making them run a gauntlet of ritual hazing. I don't know what else to call it. So we offer candidates a choice. Like, here's the same problem. You can do it, one-on-one with people, with an interviewer, if you prefer that. Some people do prefer that. Or, you can take it home, take 2 or 3 hours, and this is 2 or 3 hours we cut out of the interview process. So it's 2 or 3 hours you're not spending with a human, and you could instead do it, whenever you want in the comfort of your home. It's not timed. We time box. We're like, please don't spend more than 2 hours. Please do it this week at some point, anytime that works for you, but otherwise do it in your own time. And then we find we get better signals from that, and we find that it also appeals to a much wider variety of candidates, whether they're neurodiverse, whether they have family, who knows what family situation, they're working long hours, they can squeeze stuff in a way that works for them. And we find that by showing up front, right, we want to work with you, we'll work with whatever, we expect that everybody's lives are different, their situations are different, and we're going to respect that from not even day one, from before day one, right, when they're still in the interview process.
Awesome. Thanks very much for that. That was great. Right, so we'll move on to the next question within the attraction. A lot of tech professionals find roles or recruit through their networks. How helpful or detrimental is it, the ed&i efforts, and should we be looking to change that? So yeah, just within networks, and should we be looking into the way that we kind of find these candidates? Chinadu, have you got anything on this one?
Yes. So this, from where I sit, founders are the lead recruiters for their companies. And what I encourage them to do is, if you don't have a top candidate that's diverse, it's because your networks aren't diverse and you haven't placed yourself where those other people are. So you need to go and identify those things, just like you would identify any other leadership gap in your own and try to fill it, with a leadership coach or with activities that you would do. So wherever these people are, you're not, and you need to be there because they represent a significant component of the population that you're trying to serve. So that's how I frame it with founders, to kind of ground them in the principles that they should have diverse teams, and that they need to, as a leadership function, put themselves in the shoes of where they need to be. So that's my kind of strategy. And then when the companies get larger, I sort of I try to aim the direction of building out a diverse recruitment team, right? And then measuring their performance on where their sourcing pools are. Yeah. So it's like they have to have, like, diversity is a part of what they're compensated against, because if you don't make it a something that people do get compensated against, there's no incentive besides and they don't understand the mission alignment of the organization with diversity towards the any component of the business.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks for that. And I think that's kind of goes into making sure that the infrastructure is there to enable you to kind of attract and build diverse workforce. We know the importance of representation, but there are businesses that already lack diversity. Maybe they're kind of a startup, maybe kind of speaking on what you just said, Sinead, they're a startup, or maybe they're already built and they need to create more diverse workforce. Could you share your thoughts on how kind of businesses without much diversity can demonstrate a commitment to ED&I, Fred? Would you mind picking that one up?
Sure. I mean, I think for me, it's about, there's probably 5 things that business can do. One is about their branding and how they represent themselves, because it all starts there, right? Talent is looking at you from the outside, and the role models that you show as representatives of your company, whether it's in your marketing materials, the heroes that you show on your website, etc. The more you show the full diversity of your organization, that's where it starts, right? So the images or stories that you tell, what you celebrate, really put your values out there to the world, and I think that's really the first place where it starts. The second would be signaling, which means what signals do you use to identify who's top talent or not? For the longest time, Google only hired you if you went to Stanford or Harvard and whatever. And then eventually they realized that actually they were looking for the wrong signals, right? So what signals do you use? Today, technology, what the beautiful thing about hiring technology talent is that unlike other fields, you can actually have evidence of what someone has done. Yeah. It's not about what school they went to, because in so many other fields, it's hard to actually assess someone's capabilities. So you therefore have to look for these indirect signals, which very often are biased. Whereas within technology, has the person done this or not? You can look at their portfolio on GitHub, you can look at, projects they've actually delivered on, and you can actually really get a sense of what this person can do versus just, whether they're from the right socioeconomic status and so forth. The third I would say is partnerships. Who are you partnering with to really find underrepresented talent? Because, the one thing we know is that talent is evenly distributed around the world, but what is not is opportunity. And by forming the right partnerships within, your country or global partnerships, and one of the most exciting opportunities for partnership in this day and age is the fact that COVID has accelerated the move to remote work. And so now, you can get diverse in your company globally, right? Where you can find talent from Africa, India, Latin America. It's actually only, and that can happen both. Even if you don't want necessarily to have everyone remote, you can establish operations in these countries and so forth, and really start to, right? Finally, fourth, I would say is selection. What does your selection process look like? And how comfortable does it make it for people who are going through, the process? And then the final thing I'll say is about incentives and measurement. Are you giving the right incentives to your team, and then are you actually tracking it inside to really make sure that you're living up to what you profess?
Amazing. Thank you so much, guys. I think we covered a lot there and got some great pointers out of that. So what we're going to do now is we're going to have a quick poll based on what we've just discussed, and the results will come straight up afterwards. It will pop up on the screen. Just quickly enter what you think, and we'll tell you the results straight away. That should be done about now. I think it's Next thing we're going to move on to is retention. So we post the results there. Yeah, so it looks like everyone's been listening to what I say. Yeah, diverse leadership and the team is what they're looking for when being attracted to a business. So yeah, definitely very interesting. Moving on to retention then. So this is the next part, and when we think about retention, a big part of that is obviously kind of company culture. What happens when HR are kind of no longer involved and your new hires are immersed in the business? There's an author and DEI expert, Lily Zhang. I don't know if anyone's ever seen any of this stuff, but really, really interesting. Recently said on LinkedIn, and I'm paraphrasing here, that performative ed&i was worse than not doing it at all. She explained that when we take a superficial interest and don't do the work to improve company culture, underrepresented candidates then let down their defenses and are more vulnerable to microaggressions and discrimination in the workplace. So my first question is to Fred. I know you've just finished up, but we'll go straight back to you. An inclusive work environment is key to retention of diverse talent. But what does an inclusive culture mean to you, and what things make culture inclusive? Work culture inclusive.
I think for me, an inclusive work culture is one where people feel that they can bring their full selves to work and don't have to be chameleons in order to fit in. And I think very often people from diverse backgrounds, are, and whether it's what is, spoken and unspoken rules in the office that makes someone feel that they're, that they really belong or not. It's ultimately about belonging. Great communities make you feel that you belong. And so, it really depends on, it ultimately hangs on whether the organization culture is truly committed to accepting people from different backgrounds, and whether it's, and how authentic that is, because people can see window dressing when they come into an organization. And this is one of those places where action speaks louder than words. So they see who's being promoted. They see, what kind of jokes are being shared. They see what kind of language is being spoken, even is being used. And these signals demonstrate in very practical terms whether, this person belongs or not. And if they don't belong, eventually that's when they leave.
Yeah, I think you quickly get found out, and I think it's got to feel real for sure. So in terms of that, I think this is definitely an interesting one. When it comes to monitoring retention of diverse talent, how should usual churn within the business be distinguished from a problem with retention? So I think obviously you working within talent acquisition more. I think hopefully you've got something on this, but yeah, I think how do you kind of distinguish that usual churn from kind of problems with retention?
Yeah, and I think part of the number one stops is to make sure that you're genuinely listening to your employees, and it's not performative, right? So going through the process of constantly making sure you're creating a feedback culture, not only with everybody else, but with management and with leadership, right? And creating places and spaces where people really feel like A, they can express their true feelings, and B, that will be heard and valued and acted upon, right? And so that happens as when people are at a company, it happens when they decide to leave a company. And it's very important to make sure you're keeping your finger on the pulse in a more proactive way, as opposed to being reactive and turning around and saying, we lost 10 people this year. What's the problem, right? Because then you're already below the bar. And so it's, your people are your best voices. And so being proactive and asking for feedback and encouraging it, and also showing that you hear it and are acting upon the feedback that you're receiving, it really is paramount.
Yeah. Melissa, have you got anything in terms of monitoring how you've done that in the past?
Yeah, so I mean, of course you've got, we're in technology, of course you've got the metrics and you can look for deviations from the metrics, but that often doesn't tell a full story. What I look for in my teams, because by the time somebody has left, it's too late. You're sometimes 6 months too late. What I look for instead is, how are my teams gelled together? Is anybody being excluded? Who's being excluded? How are they speaking to each other in meetings? Are they elevating each other's voices, or are there consistent voices that are dominating the conversation and there's no room or air for anybody else in the room? And then coaching around that before it becomes a problem, or before people realize it's a problem. Whether that's through mentoring anybody, right? And it's not necessarily tied to who's the diverse candidate, who isn't, but making sure that everybody has a buddy, right? Has somebody who will elevate their voice, has somebody who will back them. If they want a mentor, that they have access to a mentor, that their right conversations are happening beforehand to keep the pulse on who's happy and who's not, and who's feeling fulfilled and who's not. You're always going to have some, right? People are always going to leave for one reason or another, but we want to make sure that if they're leaving, it's for a good reason, and they're leaving with a happy, with a happy view on what their contributions were and their experience was.
Awesome, thanks for that. Yeah, so I don't think it would be a webinar in 2021 without talking about remote in some way, or remote working. So we'll go on to that one next. So remote working has been great for kind of broadening. I think you mentioned it, Fred. Broadening the talent pool and getting more diversity kind of into teams. I think, Melissa, we've worked with you on a number of remote roles, I think, over the last kind of year or so. What have you done during the pandemic to kind of foster an inclusive environment with remote teams?
Yeah, it's been very tricky. We transitioned from a culture of disparate offices, so teams that were used to working with people not sitting in their office, but somewhere else otherwise in the country, and were used to sometimes working from home, into teams that work from home all the time, and are working with people all over the country and not just office to office. So as we made that transition, it was making sure that conversations that were happening on Slack are still happening on Slack, but the engineers are coached in when is it appropriate to still start a Zoom, because certain Slack conversations will spiral and don't go anywhere. Things like we have to be very good about documenting to make sure that even the people who didn't happen to be in the Zoom or the slide channel are able to catch up and follow along with the work that's being done. This was things that were important before, but are critical now. Because it's much, much easier to have a side conversation that if you're in the office, right, you walk in on the side conversation and suddenly you're in the know. Obviously now nobody's going to walk in on your Zoom meeting, so there's no way for those casual conversations to happen. So making sure that, human nature is going to have casual conversations, but that those are captured in a way that is discoverable and equitable, and that people who are interested in being in the room can still be in the room. It also looks like, as we think about going back to an office, who's going to go back? Why are we going back? Should we really be going back? And what problem will we be solving by offering an office space?
Yeah.
If it's because we have employees or people who we would like to hire who prefer an office because they have toddler twins at home and it's not a great place to work, it's very different than, well, I'm the manager and I need to see you working, or I don't believe you're working. So making sure we're solving the right problem, and by solving the right problem, that we're not accidentally bringing back in the dysfunctions that can happen with people in an office and side conversations and relationship building. So it looks like being very careful and deliberate and thoughtful around what we're doing, and making sure that we are really making an effort that, working from home or being remote or being nowhere near an office, being nowhere near the country of an office, it's not a downside, right? It's not a second tier, that it's still considered as viable and as easy to get promoted and as easy to do great work and have your great work be seen as if you were in, a 100-person office sitting next to the CTO.
Yeah. Awesome, thanks. And Sinead, I know that you've been part of kind of early ventures. I'm sure you've kind of been part of them over this period. Yeah, how have you kind of seen, inclusive environments and how it's been done with remote team? Have you seen any examples of success in that?
Yes, I've seen examples of success. The key components of the success of inclusive environments that people are able to create in this remote world, right? A lot of the startups I worked with already before the pandemic were going remote, and it's really focusing on the sense of belongingness, right? And layering in specific activities and intentionality on measuring that there is belongingness, and then also creating events and opportunities for that belongingness to happen, right? So it's not just Zoom calls all the time, but also factoring in, you have to have interpersonal and time that is not work related. That is a factor, right? And then also building in a factor that people have to, if you can, having gatherings or retreats that are personalized, that are trying to create that sense of belongingness. In addition to swag and all of these other elements, it's really creating a culture, because most times, and this is what I always tell the founders that I work with, that, you know, when they grow and scale their business, is that, you know, over time you build your culture by repetition of yourself. Like, so you're going to always repeat yourself, and you need to create those opportunities where your employees, whether they're remote or not, understand the culture that you're trying to replicate by creating the times where you can speak with them and say those things that are not just written. Because a lot of times in remote environments, almost all of the things that you're trying to create are written communications, and that doesn't resonate as well as the sort of the in-person consistent town halls, or even when it's just recorded. So it's very important to create your culture in a bucket of things that you do and replicate it and repeat it. So that's what I've seen and learned over especially the pandemic, where things have gotten more acute with almost everyone being remote as opposed to the core team.
Absolutely. Right, thanks very much for that, guys. Yeah, so we'll just do another quick poll at the end of that. That's kind of the end of our retention section before we move on to our last topic, which will be promotion. So yeah, you've got 30 seconds and we'll publish the results straight away. Just as you can see, based on our experiences, the question will be, let us know what's the most important for an inclusive work culture. So if you guys can just go ahead and do that, and then we can move on to the promotion section, which I believe is a very, very key part of this conversation for sure. Just wait for the results to come through. Okay, should be coming through soon. And the results were, so feeling listened to out of all of those things is the most important. Yeah, I'm not surprised by that. I think everyone needs to be listened to and be made to feel important for sure. So, right, cool. Moving on to the last topic then. So as recruiters, we know that for our candidates, clear and equitable routes to promotion is really, really key. Diversity can too easily be a bit of a checkbox exercise. You know, all of these conversations, especially in the kind of attract and retain side, have already been happening for a long time, the last 10 years. But, you know, a company may hire diverse talent and appear to kind of champion ed&i, but if its strategy isn't reflected at leadership level, the status quo can kind of remain. Without promotion, attraction and retention can kind of meet a bit of a dead end, I believe. So yeah, definitely an important part. Where equality is allowing everyone to go down the same path, equity tailors that path according to different needs. Melissa, from your experience at M-Particle and also in other kind of companies you've been at, what does an equitable route to promotion look like for you?
Yeah, so the most important thing, I think, is acknowledging that everybody at a given level doesn't have to look the same, right? They don't have to have the same skills. There's a certain baseline, right? To go from from an engineer 2 to a senior engineer, there's a certain baseline of skills we expect, but beyond the baseline, people have different skills and different strengths, and acknowledging that and building that into a part of the process where you don't have to have everybody be, the lone wolf coder or the rock star designer, but instead they say, yes, you're a good coder, but also you do a lot of important glue work that helps the whole team be more productive. Rewarding things that are often tend to be overlooked, especially in technical teams, around pro-social behaviors, around lifting each other up, and around making the whole team better. And building that into is a part of your, not just your ladder, right, your level ladder, but as a part of your everyday culture. Can ensure that people who have built skills outside of, right, outside of the core set, which especially a lot of diverse candidates have had to, for whatever reason, had to build skills outside of the core set in order to be heard, in order to be taken seriously, and in order to be, you know, to be centered on the right things. So making sure that you take that into account. Candidates can look different. Candidates can have different, you know, if you flatten their skill sets out on a piece of paper, they make different shapes, but they're still equally valid. You know, a senior engineer in 2 or 3 different or 5 or 10 different models. And then having that be a part of the conversations from the beginning, so that when you have candidates who look a little different skill set wise, it's just a known path, right? Yep. You're following you're following the senior engineer path of somebody who is a really good team builder, or a really good architect, or a really good, you know, really good coder. Those are all valid and equally rewarded. Yeah.
Maura, have you got an opinion on this one?
Yeah, you know, and I, as I'm reflecting on it, I'm realizing that it sort of is an extension of, you know, what we should be thinking about when we're sourcing for talent as well. And that really is primarily on the theme of tying everything to concrete deliverables and goals, and really making, you know, the end result less ambiguous, right? So when people come on board, you know, one of the things that we leverage here at Canoe is a 30, 60, 90 plan, right? So this is what we expect you to understand at the first 30 days, 60 days, 90 days. These are the goals we want you to complete. This is how we want you to get there, right? And so when you're looking at your employee pool and you're conducting these year-end reviews, it's very important to be able to document the goals that you agreed upon, look back on them, see the progress that's been made, you know, and really be able to kind of accurately build in the structure to measure performance against one another equally, right? And again, it's sort of that process of building in structure to be to minimize any of the bias that often can creep in. To Melissa's point, you know, I think that piece about what else does this person bring to the table that we weren't actually initially thinking about, right? So how have they actually brought value that we didn't consider at first, but we need to make sure that we're recognizing that now. Being very clear, transparent, and minimizing ambiguity there, I think, is key.
Fred, have you got anything on this one at all?
No, I think that ultimately, you know, for me, it's about, again, it's one of those places where actions speak louder than words. And, you know, I think organizations really realizing that promoting diverse talent, building, you know, role models of difference in your organization. We need to shift from looking at it as we're doing a favor to diverse talent by giving them these opportunities, to rather looking at we're actually strengthening our capabilities as an organization, and this is actually a part of our competitive advantage. And I think that mindset change is the most critical thing that needs to happen. Because without that, none of this will go anywhere, right? And ultimately, there's data and the evidence after evidence that shows that, you know, more diverse teams win, and they make better decisions, and then they, you know, and so, you know, founders, CEOs, HR teams need to start really lead. I almost think that we need to lead from a business perspective. This makes you more money, right? And start from there, rather than, oh, we're doing this as a favor to people that, you know, we think need to be helped. And I think that mindset shift is really critical for anything to work.
Yeah, and often that's an easier way to kind of get through to people, going from that business side first. But yeah, it's really a valid point there. I think as ambitious as we want to be about diversity, we are sometimes always limited, and it's important to know this, to demographics of the tech industry to a certain extent. Sinead, what role do diversity targets play into promotions? And do you think about kind of succession planning there as well?
So what I tell folks is really more structuring. This is what I've worked on actually with some companies, has been more creating a comprehensive look at how you're compensating based on diversity. So when you say diversity targets, it's really more if you match sort of in a way. There's the buckets where we're talking about attracting. There's recruiting from those sources that are diverse, and then compensating people for the value add that brings to the diversity of the team, and then also recruit. And then when you retain and promote, those are long-term value propositions. And what I've encouraged founders to do is structure the long-term value proposition or long-term returns in technology, which are like RSUs or stock options, also to this same long-term value proposition for hiring in terms of diversity, such that if you believe over the long term, if you can retain and promote more talent, then the people who create that sense of belongingness for those groups should be compensated for their actual additional value proposition to the company. So you can basically encourage those people who are the rock stars that everyone wants to be around, that can build great diverse teams, reward them for what they're bringing to the table. And that's basically the sentiment that I say is the best structure. Like that's the overall structure. And how do you do that? That's to me is the nugget, where if you can create these larger spheres of influence and then reward them for what they bring to the table, then when they're more tied to you before they leave, and then they have more incentive to grow their influence even bigger within your organization.
Yeah, amazing. Melissa, have you got any opinion on that at all? Just on the tech industry and stuff, yeah, and demographics.
I really like the idea of giving more RSUs to people who are building diverse teams. I like that a lot. Anybody here listening? I really like that idea. But I think it's important. I think it is important, right, that people see diverse people in leadership. I think it's important that, when you bring in a new person to your company, that they can see somebody in your organization and say, I want to be like them. I want to follow their path. I want to see what it took for them to get there. And maybe they have some experience in some of the challenges that I will face in my, as I start my path. I think that is probably one of the highest value, easiest return on investments you can make, because it's having somebody who can serve as a role model.
Yeah. Awesome. I'll go to Fred on this next question, but we're aware of kind of mentorship and sponsorship. I know that you play a big part in that for many people, Fred. Have you seen any kind of programs that are successful, and what does success actually look like?
I think success ultimately looks like people who, number one, feel that they belong, and number two, that they progress. You see them actually rising through the organization, and you don't have this constant, ceiling where diverse talent at a certain point, there's a cliff and they all drop off. So that for me is, if you have the data and evidence to show that people who are diverse are as likely to succeed as anyone else, then you're winning, right? And what have we seen that works? I think the most effective is, obviously there's two things. One is people that, who are like you, who are in the organization, that can serve as role models and that can mentor you and coach and support you. Number two would be people who are not like you, who are actually, stepping, who are actually going above and beyond to make sure that you are succeeding. So whether it's men mentoring women, or people of, white people mentoring people of color, whatever it is, I think that, we need to look at, because there are certain things that you will not be able to do, whether it's navigating cultural nuances, if you don't have these sponsors, right? So you need to have sponsors who actually realize that this is valuable to them. And then finally, one more thing is additional investment in people from outside resources, right? Whether it's additional training that someone might get, or helping someone to get into different networks, but it's really saying, I'm committed to your success. I'm going to do whatever it takes to make sure that you succeed.
Yeah.
And I can double in here. My personal experience has been like professionally when I entered the workforce, it was watching people in leadership that were advocating aggressively for people who might have been marginalized or, that were diverse, and making sure that whether it was a pregnant woman was getting 6 months of leave, like I saw that happen in major corporations, and seeing those people who had to take the flack in those meetings, those people aren't, the allies really need to be empowered. Like what Fred said, if those people can be empowered beyond just the fact that they get, a great value out of doing it for themselves, but really making sure that the business is encouraging those behaviors. So that's one of the reasons why I created that kind of policy that I've been trying to champion.
Yeah, I think it's really, really important, something that Chinua said about allies. And this is something that maybe isn't so relevant from a top down, but from a bottom up, when you have, people who are struggling to be heard or have their voices heard. You say, oh, get a mentor. And they're like, well, okay, but then what? The most important thing I found in the day-to-day life of somebody who is struggling with that is not a mentor or even a sponsor, but is an ally, is a buddy, is a peer who will elevate your voice for you in the day-to-day, everyday meetings. When you say something in a meeting and somebody else takes credit, they will redirect credit back to you. They will give you honest feedback when you're saying, you can ask them, was I being too pushy in that meeting? Was I, you can gut check your instinct with that person and trust that they will A, be honest with you, and B, not weaponize that against you. I think we often overlook the real importance of having a buddy, of someone you can trust on your team. And the flip side of that is, if there's nobody on your team who can be your buddy, there is no amount of mentorship or sponsorship that's going to make you happy in your day-to-day life. Doesn't matter how good your manager is, if nobody else on your team will hear you or elevate you or help you grow with that peer relationship.
I think there's something to add as well, is that we need to find the balance between bringing people in cohorts, so that they have people who are like them, that they can, sometimes there's certain things that only, you can, that someone maybe who comes from a similar background like you can understand, right? And you've got to be able to have that safe space to have that conversation. But you also need those sponsors, the allies, the peers who are not like you, who will also work with you. So you've got to be able to get that balance right, and pay attention to both sides.
Sure. Amazing. Well, that kind of rounds up the kind of end of our topics there. So we will be moving on to, and I can see we've had some questions come through, which is great. I think we're just going to do a quick poll now at the end of this, which will just be on when should a business kind of share their routes to promotion. So that will just pop up now, and then we'll just have a look at the questions and get that going. Thanks so much, guys, for your input there. It was some really amazing bits of information. And I'm just having a read here on the Q&A. Amazing. Right, so we'll start off. Hasn't got a name on it, but cool. So the results are in. So they say at interview stage. Fair enough. Yeah, some good bit of information there. Amazing, cool. So what I'm going to do is just kind of throw these out to you guys, kind of nice and openly. We've got a question here. So how important is it to the success of your ed&i efforts to know your current employee demographics and set targets? Has anyone got anything to input on that? Maura, have you got anything to say on that?
Yeah, I think that this is such a key one, and it's a delicate balance, right? So, for example, Canoe, we are in the financial technology space, right? Finance and technology, which are two industries that don't have a great track record when it comes to diverse talent, right? So I think part of it is understanding what talent is out there, right? You know, what's the current spread, where are they, and then where is our current pool in relationship to that, right? A clear kind of analysis of where are we and where do we want to be, and then building that into the funnel, right? So you know, making sure you're making a very clear, equitable process, but also understanding, you know, and making sure that you're tapping into the right pools. And that's really where the data can really speak for itself to make sure that you're accurately getting into the marketplace, as opposed to kind of sitting back and hoping that they come, right? It really takes a more proactive approach there.
Yeah. And yeah, I've got another question here. Has anyone got anything else to say on that particular point? I'll move on to another one. We've got to try and get through as many as possible. What if a company cannot diversify its team and leadership if the talent pool does not allow it? I suppose, yeah, I mean, has anyone got anything like Melissa? Would you like to?
Yeah, I think, like, let's be honest, it's not easy, right? It's not going to happen by accident. But I have yet to see that if you put an effort to it and you make a sincere effort by having the right recruiters, by setting targets, by incentivizing all the key players, that it's not possible. I can give you a really concrete example. I went from the only engineering leader to now my group is 75% engineering leadership is women. Just happens, right? It wasn't an accident.
Yeah.
But once you set up your process for it, once you identify, right, where the pool is, once you start building on that network, because diverse candidates tend to have networks of more diverse candidates. And then like magic, the Whisper network starts sending, especially at the leadership level, start sending the candidates your way. And all of a sudden it's not so hard, but you have to put in the work.
Yeah, setting out those expectations. It's funny how things can change with a bit of intent, you know. That's great. This one would be interesting. Is there anything that any techniques that you've seen that you do not recommend, that you've seen over the years, Fred? Have you seen anything that you do not recommend people to try and do?
I would say anything that is a flavor of the month, because building diverse teams takes a long time. It takes, commitment. There will be mistakes. There will be some people that will not work out, but really, showing long-term commitment and not just, oh, I did this little token thing for a little bit and it didn't work out. So you see, let's continue being as we were before. So it requires real long-term commitment and ability to stick with it for the long term. I think that for me is what doesn't work is if you just try and do something because you feel you need to. And I think secondly, what also doesn't work is if you're doing it because you are, simply just for window dressing. I would rather say almost don't do it, remain as you are. But if you are going to actually move in this direction, then be true and be authentic and actually, back whatever you're saying with true action.
Yeah, awesome. Anyone else got anything on that? No, all good. Cool. So yeah, another question here. What's the best way for employees to broach an EDI conversation with colleagues, or should this not be done in an informal setting? Junaid, have you got anything on that?
Well, it depends, right? It really depends on what the situation is. Like, there's a lot of dicey situations that you want to handle in a formal way, in a written way, and then there's some dicey situations that you actually want to play delicately to make sure that you understood what the situation is. But it's really one of those play it by ear. Probably have someone on speed dial, or have depending on the situation, you should seek counsel or have a pulse of someone that is really aware of nuances that you may be missing. I think that one of the things I've learned over the years is that people who are in HR or who are in talent acquisition actually have a strong depth and wealth of understanding of issues that you probably are not aware of that are always happening in your company. So if you want to really make a difference, it's really to understand what they're dealing with and how you should play something that is going on in the company, because it may not be an isolated incident. It may be a part of, it may be a strategy, maybe broader things going on. So that's my sort of matrix of the non-answer.
Yeah, great. Thanks for that. I'm going to the last, probably we've only got time for one more quickly. Are you guys, as everybody have, I've got a question here. Do you think it's harder now to get more diverse people just because everybody's trying to get diverse talent? Are you finding it more difficult now? Maura, would you like to just have a go at that one?
I think this is an interesting one because, you know, kind of turning it from the employer standpoint of, oh darn, it's hard to get that, you know, diverse talent because everybody wants it, right? You know, kind of thinking about these candidates who, you know, might be getting in mails from LinkedIn, you know, threefold, but you know, so much of what we're talking about here is performative DE&I strategies, or will I really be received once I'm here, right? And so it sort of circles back to, you know, worrying less about the competition that's out there and really more focused on, is my company aligned? Are we really willing to be radically transparent about where we are and where we want to be? And are we actually doing the work to create a culture that can properly receive diversity? Because at the end of the day, you know, people are humans and they can recognize real versus not real, or real commitment versus, you know, not real commitment. And I think if you put in the work to create a company and create a strategy to really genuinely, you know, support and triumph DEI, those are the strategies that will stick, and you don't have to worry as much about the competition in the market because people will see it.
Yeah, amazing. There's sorry if we didn't get to your questions. There was amazing and there's many great questions there. Apologies. But maybe log in for the next one and we'll try and get through them. Just a quick thank you, really. Thank you so much to my the panelists. You've done a really great job, and I'm sure, and I'm hoping people have gone home with some great knowledge and some tools and some techniques to help implement ed&i strategies more effectively. And yeah, we'll be in touch. We'll get some feedback from the webinar, and yeah, we'll implement it into our next one. But thanks very much, guys, and everybody take care.